Good morning, everybody. This week we are going to expand on our lighting demonstration slash tutorial that we had last week. This week, though, we're going to talk more about the tools and specifically the visual lighting software that we use here at the office to create our designs. What is visual lighting? Software created by Acuity Lighting Solutions. It allows us to design for indoor and outdoor spaces, create fixtures, schedules, point-by-point lighting calculations, and it can import IES files from any manufacturer. Um, Lighting ensures that we have accurate, semi-accurate uh, calculations, and it allows us to export it to a TWG or PDF if we need to. As usual, all of our training files can be found in the training folder on the S drive. I will have a full description of the different processes up there at a future time, but we'll pretty much go through everything today. Also, there's additional resources on Visual's website, visual-3d.com. They also have a YouTube channel that has quite a few videos and a user guide. And of course, if you have any questions at any time, please do not hesitate to give me a yell and we can see what we can do to solve the lighting problems. With that, we'll go right into the demonstration. Visual lighting just got a recent update. It now has a new icon, and that's basically all that's changed in the software. Uh, it's this little yellow with blue light bulb. So I'm going to click on that. There we go. Like I said, it just came out probably, well, I believe in early January. But for the most part, the biggest change I've seen is the icon. So hopefully that means they're going to be expanding and updating more to the software going forward. This is what you get whenever you open the software. You have your little news information over here, a couple little videos, different products that they're now pushing, your recent projects, and then you have the new interior, new exterior, or if you already have a project started, you can open that. For this demonstration today, we're going to use the new exterior project. So go ahead and click on that. Okay. So a blank visual software opens up, and I will provide a link in my document to where you can download and install the software and our license keys. We have one license for the entire office. It can be used by multiple people, but not at the same time. And I believe our license runs for a year and it's up for renewal in June. They're not that expensive, so if more and more people get used to using the software and we see a need for it, we could add additional licenses. All right, so here's the lighting software. It's pretty simple. It has your ribbon of tools across the top on your home tab. It has other tabs that allow you to do more specific tasks. I predominantly stay in the home tab except for if there's a little setting here and there that needs to be changed. On the side here is your project toolbar. I typically minimize that. I don't use that very often. And on the right, we have our layers, which these 4 layers here are automatically put in. That is where our fixtures, our calculation zones, and backgrounds and solids all go. You also will have a tab for properties and a tab for statistics, and we'll get to those 2 later. A question is, can we follow along in the software during this demonstration? I don't know that it will allow you to run without a license at this time. And since we only have one license, it's kind of important to have the demonstrator have that. So right now, I do not know the answer to that. You can try. I don't know if there was a trial version of the lighting software or not. So whenever I first open up Visual 3D or Visual Lighting software, the first thing I usually do is I go to my file, and then go down to import. Import allows us to import CAD files, PDF files, and other files, but CAD file is usually the one that we use the most. So I'm going to open up that. Now for this case, I have created a demonstration file. So let me go to that. That's under CAD Training, Monthly CAD Training, and we have a lighting MD. I've already cleaned this drawing up a little bit. I have to admit, visual does not do the best job rendering our CAD files. A lot of hatching and text gets very mangled and hard to read. So just keep that in mind. There's not much I know how to do about it, but that will be part of the process that we'll go through here to start. It can take a little while for those files to import depending on how big of the file that is. All right. Okay, so the file imported. And you don't really see much. Over here onto the right-hand side, there's our CAD file. It looks like we also have something way over here. So the first thing I usually do is I take a look at my layers. And you can see here's the main drawing. You can minimize it. That's the only drawing it brought in. If there's extras in your drawing, it will bring those in too to add to the mess. But typically you can get rid of those pretty easily. So once we have that file brought in, I try to do a little bit of cleanup. First thing I do is I use the erase tool and just do a big box around areas to try to get rid of, and then right click and get rid of as much as possible. Zoom all, and it kind of keeps, you just keep moving in closer and closer. So here I usually do not keep any of our templates or title blocks, so we can get rid of that. And zoom in, we're getting closer. Got some hidden tables. But this can be a time consuming, or if you're not familiar with the project at all, it can be a little bit of a challenge finding all the items that are left behind. So now we got into here. You'll notice these layers all come in with a pencil. That pencil means that you can edit the layer. So right now it's kind of like freezing and thawing, and so, but for this beginning part, I usually keep those visible so I can actually see what's going on. Now with lighting, like I mentioned last week, there's a few things that do not take into account, like contours and such. So those are things that we can typically get rid of. So when I open a drawing, I have all these extra layers that I can get rid of. So I don't need any images, I don't need any of the architecture, I don't need any demolition plan. So I usually can click on those, and if you right click, you come up with different options, and there's one that's called delete layer and entities. I found that's a very good way of really start getting this drawing cleaned up quickly. You'll notice things start disappearing. The purpose of getting rid of this information is so that you do not, first it makes the software run quicker, and also it makes it a lot easier to read the drawing. I also get rid of all the contours. So for some reason, alphabetically, concrete shows up in the middle of this, so you have to be careful there. So I can get rid of all the existing contours, those disappear. Any kind of existing soils I usually get rid of. Any ENS. So there's quite a few different layers that I try to get rid of to clean up the drawing, so it makes it easier for me to read what's going on. So feature lines are another really important one that they really can make things confusing, so I get rid of those. So that's usually the existing layers. You can get rid of all of your profile layers because we're not worried about those. And really the main ones I try to get rid of are the contours, just because that's usually the thing that clutters up the CAD file the most visually. And again, I'm just right clicking after they're selected and saying delete layer and entities. So once you get familiar with how to do this, it can go pretty quickly. I usually get rid of the same layers every single time. Let me see. Oops, there we go. Took a little while there. Scroll. Uh, Figure lines, I usually get rid of those, but I leave other points just in case there is an issue where a symbol is on that point layer. And that's a good start. So we have a lot of this cleaned up. I can see the property line fairly clearly. I can see the existing vegetation, even though they don't come into account. It's nice to see those things so you don't put a light right on top of an existing tree. If we had the proposed trees, that would be a good thing to show in here too, but it will clutter it up quite a bit to do that. You'll also notice that leaving the utilities on is really important so that you're not putting a light fixture right on top of one of the underground, underground storm water or a water line or anything like that. So this looks pretty good. Actually, the text came in surprisingly good. Typically, it comes in very jagged, hard to read, or impossible to read. But we're looking pretty good on this one. You'll see the boxes for wipeouts don't come in properly. It looks like we have a border for a surface somewhere in here. So in my case, what I usually just try to clean it up with what I know layer-wise. Leave everything else because I typically do not have a full sense of the project or scope of the project when I'm working on these. If you are the designer on it, you'll be able to clean these up probably in CAD a little quicker and make it easier to know what's going on. Once I have the layers cleaned up, I'll right-click on this middle icon here and we can make all the layers say uneditable. I'm not sure if that's a real word or not, but that's what they call it. All right. So you'll see everything went to gray shaded. That means you cannot edit it, you cannot select it, which is a big plus. Before I get the next step, this bar right here is your snaps and grid snap. I found that this can be a big trouble when you're just trying to get things started. I recommend just flipping that off and you're good to go. All right. So now we have our base drawing. We have our background is what it's called. So that's what would be on the background layer and all these other layers. You can minimize this if you want. It doesn't really make a difference. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a calculation zone. Calculation zone makes that grid of points where it actually figures out the lumens that are hitting the ground or the foot candles at the ground wherever on your site. Again, lighting does not take into account any type of topography or vegetation, so you don't have to worry too much about that. The calculation zone, I use that as an overall grid. So as soon as I clicked on calculation zone, you can see my toolbar changed. I want to make my row spacing to be 10 feet and my column spacing to be 10 feet. That's our typical grid spacing. And I like to call this first calculation zone trespass. Okay, so once that is all done, the key to these calculation zones is you want to make sure you're a fairly good distance outside of your property line because this will let you see if there is any light trespass. So I'll start there and that looks pretty good. So there's my 10 by 10 grid of all my calculation points. These points down here never will be touched, but that's okay. We'll get to those later. So that's the first thing you would need to do to start your calculation and your design. Once you have a calculation zone, there's multiple ways you can go about where you go next. One thing that does get taken into calculation zone and calculations is buildings. So we can see our building in Visual 3D. They call those structures. If you hit the down arrow, you can see there's a polygon structure. That's the next thing we're going to do. So there we go. We now are in that tool. This is one place that I do use the snaps, but there is a caveat. Visual 3D does not like when you snap on items that are different elevations. But they will not tell you that until you get the whole way around your site or around your building. So if you know the property or you know the drawing is fairly good and the building is all the line work on the building is on one elevation, you can use snaps. If you don't, that's another thing about visual ID. Uh, you don't have to be perfectly exact. So in this case, I'll turn this off. I'm not sure, but I'll zoom in here and my first click will be right around that corner. And then let me see, this building looks like it goes to here, and I'm just eyeballing it in this case. If I had snaps on, it would actually snap to hatch patterns. It would snap to every single little line that you have shown here. It basically explodes everything down to line segments when you bring it in, even the text. So at this point, I'm just going around. Oh, there's one thing I really forgot to do that needs to be done with the buildings before you start. Now, the other thing is there's no editing tools once you get into this. So you have a one and done type of issue. So if you mess up, you hit escape and you start over. So hopefully you can remember to do some of these settings before you start. So again, I'll go to my structure, polygon. This is the key, the building height. You have to put that in prior to starting. So I'm putting this in. This is a warehouse type building. I'm going to put this at 30 feet. Hopefully we have a rough idea at what size the building is, but if not, just kind of have to vary it for whatever the use is. And I'm sure all these buildings are not the same height in this case, but we're going to treat them like they're all 30 feet. So again, I'm just tracing around on the corners, trying to be exact or close to it. Now in this case, I know this is I believe this is an overhead bay. So that I would even count that as part of the building because we do not need to have calculations done underneath there at this point. But when you get into areas like this is where you could have issues with your snap tool because it will snap to just about anything. Okay, and once it looks like I got the whole way around, you click right click to close, and we now have a building. So once we have that, one way we usually do not calculate inside the buildings. So there is what's called a mask. You can take this mask and you can do a surface mask on it. Select on your grid, right click, and then click on the building. And there you go. And that will take all the grid spots out of there. And you learned that just recently. I used to just leave them in there and delete them out later. I found that was a much quicker way of doing it. Okay, so we have our overall trespass statistic calculation zone, I should say. Calculation zone. There we go. Nothing's in it because we have no light fixtures yet. Now, for calculations for most of the townships, we are required to show what it would look like on the paved or pedestrian area. In order to do that calculation, we need to create a statistics zone. These are the trickiest things to create because you again, it's a one and done type of situation. You have to try to exclude any of the landscape islands or anything like that in your creation. So it can get a little tricky. One good thing to remember, though, is that it only calculates on the grid points. So you can have a break in your calculation zone in between grid points, and it's not going to be referenced. You may see some of your lumen foot candle contours broken in those areas. So I try to minimize them, but that is one thing that you can always remember to try. So let's get it right in here. We'll go polygon. We're going to take this grid, is what we're working with. You pick an area. I usually pick a corner somewhere. And this is going to be real rough. But basically, you are outlining any paved area, any pedestrian area on the site. And that is what needs to have the calculations actually done and more specifically done, I guess I should say. So here's going to cause a problem back in here most likely. But again, this example is a fairly simple example. I'll show you one of the issues when you have landlocked areas, or pavement locked, I guess I could say. So this whole area right in here is all landscaping. So I can go like this, click across. Notice how I'm not crossing any points, and then I can go in here and I can exclude all this lawn area that should not be calculated. So this is another place where it might be helpful to kind of map out beforehand how you're going to get your path around. Now notice that little opening allows for this area that's not being calculated to go through. So again, I'm going to go down to here. And another key thing is we only need to calculate to our property line. Now in this case, the property line is set quite a way back from the actual roadway because there's a train right away in through here, railroad. So that helps a little bit. We can just follow that around, get these couple spaces. And again, you don't have to be right on, but if you don't like that, you can always go back up here and hit the undo button, and that will take you back one step. So if you realize something, you might have to hit it a lot of times, but it might be still easier than going back and redoing the entire thing if you missed the spot. And again, we just want to make sure we get all of the paved area. I guess it wouldn't have to be all in one statistic zone, but it's a little bit easier if it is. Okay, so there, I made it the whole way around. When I have that line there, I can just right click and that closes it. Now if I zoom in, you'll notice that outside of the zone, these are really small, they are just a plus symbol. Inside the zone, they're at asterisks. So over here, I can actually click on that stat zone, go down to the bottom, and I'm going to call this paved area and return. And the paved area all has green as its little point styles. And you can change the point styles. There's lots of different ways. I usually just leave them the way they are, go from there. Okay. So that's the setup so far. Now we're ready to start placing some light fixtures. We have our overall calculation zone. We have our statistic zones of the paved area. We have our buildings blocked off. The next thing we would do is we have to pick our fixtures. So we go to the schedule, and that opens up this window that allows you to add fixtures. Now I have already gone through and picked out some of the more common fixtures that I like to start with, and that means you can just go to import, and on the S drive under design, lighting design, there is a folder and it has the default LSI fixtures. These are the fixtures I found work really well with cutoff. They have good coverage, and like I said earlier last week, they had a fairly decent price range. We also have thousands of IES files from other manufacturers of lights, which all can be individually brought in depending on the design or if there's some special requirement by the owner or the consultant. But in this case, we're just going to take the default LSI and hit open. Now in that, I have a fixture for each of the main distribution patterns, the thing that you want to look for, like we discussed last week, the catalog number. This 2 is a type 2 distribution, so that's throws to the sides. The 3 throws a little bit more forward. FT is type 4 or forward throw. And then we have a type 5, which is 5 wide, which throws in all direction. And then I have 2 building mounted light fixtures in here. One is the forward throw, FT, and one is a wide throw, WT. So those light fixtures will give you a very good start on how to light or plan your lighting. So now we have our lights imported. We can now go to place. Under place, I use the place and orient command. This allows me to point where I want, or place the light and then rotate it until it points in the direction I want. So in this case, we have some parking lot over here that should be lit. We have parking spaces here. We got parking spaces here, and a drive aisle back and through there. So we need to figure out how we're going to light this so that all those areas meet the minimum requirement of 0.2 foot candles, but average somewhere above 2-foot candles as a group. A lot of the times I'll go right for the type 4 or the forward throw feature. And that on here is the forward throw type C. Before placing the light fixture, you need to set the mounting height. We're going to do 20 foot here. Again, that could be 25 is I think the highest that for parking lots and stuff in our area. But you have to consult the lighting regulations for whatever municipality that you're doing your design in. Okay, so now I have a type 4 forward throw light fixture at a 20-foot height, and I'm going to put it right on line with a stripe on a parking lot. That way, less chance of a car hitting it and bending the pole. And typically, we like to have the poles about 3 feet off the face of the curb. So I'm going to put it just like that. So I angled it, rotated it, accepted it. It's ready to go to the next one if I want. I'm going to exit out of there. You can see it labeled it as type C at 20-foot height. There's different ways to change the labeling, so you can always go back and change that, but this works really well so that you can visually see what type of fixture it is and how high it is. There's also tools for, let me see, where are they? Calculate. Oh. Under construct, there is a distance tool, so you can, so right there, if this is, so we are about, if we zoom in, 2.5 feet. We're right around that. We could actually move that back to about a little bit farther to get into the right place. In order to move a fixture, use the move command, click somewhere on the fixture, and you can move it back. And you can see the rendering of the lines are horrible. That was a square before, now it's a triangle. Nothing seems to be square. Every time I zoom in, it changes shape. So it's just one of those things that you kind of just got to get used to and accept. It's difficult sometimes. It can look really strange what it looks like. All right. So we got our first light set and placed. We want to see what this looks like. You go back up to your calculate button. Calculate. It goes through and it says, here you go. There's my calculations. You'll notice all the numbers in this area of the grid have changed. We have a red one, which signifies a hot spot. That's the highest number foot candle in the grid. This one is a 5.3. Everything else is less than that. But I don't see the contours. So let's see. We go to luminary, nope, calculations, then contours. And you can actually customize what numbers you want to see. I typically leave them alone. Sometimes I move the 0.25 to 0.2 because that is what a lot of times is allowed at trespass zones. So I can see exactly what's going on. But 0.25 helps also because you can kind of push it a little bit closer. And then you hit the show contours button. Now, like I said, one of the nice things about these LSI fixtures is that they have a really good cutoff behind the fixture. It doesn't bleed light backwards very far. So in this case, we don't have to worry about trespass. We're looking at this and it's staying on our property, at least behind us. Off to the side here, yes, it is going out into the railroad right away. That may be an issue. It depends on the site. It depends on the owners. Uh, in this case, if that is an issue, we would have to fix that and try to move, or we'd have to choose a different fixture that would allow us to light this area without trespassing onto the right of way. A lot of times, though, what I'll do is I'll throw a lot of lights down first just to get an idea of what the pattern's going to be like, and then I can go back and tweak the light fixture to, as far as brightness and what model of fixture or catalog number it is. Okay. Now this area here is a large area that needs to be lit. Looks like we already, you can see I stole from a lighting plan that we already did. So this is where, uh, in this case, the client only wanted to put one light pole in this whole project. He didn't care if it didn't light everything. The municipality did not have regulations that required the lighting. So in this case, uh, we went with just one light fixture. So that we put that in there once. Again, you go to your home tab, you go to click here, place and orient. We're still at 20 feet, but this time I'm going to change my type C. I'm going to put in a type 5, which throws in all directions. So if I put that right here, you don't have to worry about which direction it's facing. Well, actually you do. Let me see here. We're going to point it there. Okay, so as soon as I placed it, you'll notice that it puts little caret bracket type things around the numbers. That means that they are no longer correct. They need to be recalculated. You can go back up with the calculate and click on that, and you'll see how that works. Now the type 5 throws light in all directions. It's a very good fixture to, or distribution pattern to use when you're in a big parking lot. So that one is probably too bright for this case because it's getting really close. Well, no, it's over the property line with greater than a 0.2. So here you may look at this fixture and say, okay, I need something that's not this bright. And the way that I've been doing things like that, or adjusting it, you would go to your schedule. And you have to remember, if you have multiple fixtures of the same type, you would either have to copy. So if I selected this and said copy, that would work. In this case, I only have one of these, so I can actually just go right over to the file name, click on that, and it will get, and then I have to go find the IES files that I'm using. So this is kind of a pain in the butt because it never seems to remember where I was. So again, S design, lighting design, and then IES files, and then you have to find the manufacturer, which is LSI, and then it's an LED, and then an area, and then this one is the SLM. Like I said, I've been doing this for a while. This seems natural to me, but it can be very confusing. I know my default one is an 18. That means it has 18 diodes for the lights. So we need to bump that down to see if we can get not as bright. So it's not going over by much. So I'm just going to bump it down to the 12, which a little bit less lights on it. And then I have to find the 5W. So this is where our discussion last week on how do you pick a file, what does all this mean? So this is the slim SLM is the type of fixture. It's an LED, has 12 light diodes in it. Silicon something SIL. 5 is the distribution pattern. 40 is the color temperature, so that's a daylight color, and 70 is the color rendering index. So this is what I usually run at, 40 and 70. We're going to try that with a 12 rather than an 18. So essentially all I'm doing is I'm selecting that fixture. It's changing the light. So now all the calculations are out of date. You run the calculation and you see if it moved it far enough to make it work. It's still not quite there. So there's a lot of trial and error going through this process to see what does work and what doesn't work. Now, in this case, now I'm going to start questioning, does the type 5 fixture actually make sense in this area or not? It might be better to try to put two type 4s out along here. So we can always go up to erase, delete. You'll notice the grid goes out of date, but I'm going to go through here and see what happens if I put a different light fixture or different strategy. So we know that throws fairly far away. So I might be able to say a light fixture. Oh, we got to watch it for the storm. So I might be able to put one here. And I'm going to calculate from there. So what we find there is, hey, now we got a big spot here in the middle that's not being reached. I have to slide it down closer to the property line so we can make sure we have these turn out right. So it's a lot of trial and error and just getting used to what each fixture can do. Off to the side here, you can see the trespass calculations aren't critical in my mind. If we were more exact with it, they might be useful, but it's good to have that there just to show that we're not trespassing over the property line. The paved area is the key of what we're looking for. This is where we need an average of a 0.2 foot candle for the entire paved area. The maximum can be adjustable. I mean, it can go higher and lower, but that counts towards your average, or I'm sorry. So you have the maximum, which in this case is, look for the red spot. It looks like it's 5.3, and that's located right there. The minimum is 0 because we have all these blue dots that are 0. We have to get rid of all those blue ones within the paved area in order to get these calculations to work. And then the average over min is the one that can be required in some municipalities of 5:1 for commercial uses. So it can be a challenge. It's a lot of hit and miss, trial and error, going through, seeing what does work, what doesn't work. I'm going to reverse back through here. You can see it didn't update while I was undoing. So I have to recalculate, bring my type 5 back. So it looks like I could possibly go with a 9 diode one, or I could try moving this fixture over. And now you can see if this is the property line goes right up through there, we are now not trespassing greater than 2 across that property. A 0.2, I should say. Okay. And you can see how the software automatically joins the areas together, draws the contours in. So that's really nice because you don't have to worry about doing any of that. Okay. So back in here, this is really tight to the property line, but it's a really wide area. This is where your selection is important. This time I'm going to use a type 2 fixture at 20 foot. And we're going to just place it somewhere here in the middle, right off the edge of the pavement. And recalculate. You can see that one throws left and right really far. It does not have a lot of light coming off the back, so it looks like we're good with trespass. We're not going over the property line with more than 0.2, and it's lighting up that entire area. Now you'll notice that also we have a new hotspot, or a new bright area, and that's the 7.4, which is calculated over here. Our average is now up to 1 foot candle. This needs to be a 2, and our minimum needs to be a 0.2. So now we look around, we say, okay, where is our minimums at? We got a minimum here and a minimum here and back up and through here. And it's doing its autosave. There we go. So like I said, it's just a lot of trial and error. You go through, you pick your light fixtures. You have to really know your light fixtures or get used to what they're doing. In this case, I'm going to do some building mounted lights. They are usually located a little bit lower. So I'm going to put it at 10 feet, and usually there's a light near each door. So if I put one here, and it looks like there's a door here, and we're going to put one, let's say there's a door back here. looks like there's a door here. Okay, on this last one, you can see my building, my calculation zone, my light's a little bit outside of that. You might have to adjust that. It should be okay on this case. Okay, so I just added 1, 2, 3, 4 building mounted lights. Hit the calculation, you look at the stats, and you say, okay, my average is now 1.2, but I still have zeros. And those zeros are up here at the front. Let me see, we could probably try a type 4. Change your height back to what you need it to be, 20 foot. And we'll just place it somewhere around in there, that way. We still have a minimum of zeros somewhere up right in this area, right here on this. So you'll see that the building mounted lights do not throw quite as far as what's needed in this case. What we could do possibly is moving this fixture back. We're still catching 1. I don't know that I see any other. It doesn't look like we have any other zeros other than that 1. So let's see if we can move that another parking stall to make that work. A lot of times I use the parking stalls as measuring guides. It's a little quicker than trying to measure everything out. All right, so it looks like we have a 0 right there. That should probably be a building mounted light. Set the height. Nope, I put it in the middle of the building. No big deal. We'll just move it to our location right there. Still says we have a 0 somewhere. And this is part of the fun too. It's just the challenge of finding out where is this 0. So I'm looking around the edges of my paved area. It's typically what happens, and looking for any blue zeros like this. Now we stopped there. That one right there, it got caught in between, so we missed that little grid tick right there. Now in this case, this is not affecting anything. What we do need to do though, except for our statistics over here, so a minimum 0. So in this case, we can go up to mask, and this might be a little bit of fudging, but hey, it's not gonna affect too much. So I can make a big box like that. As soon as I did that, that got rid of the 0. You can see our minimum is now 0.1. That really should be 0.2. So we're still kind of dark on this site, but I'm not going to go too much farther right now because we need to do some other important steps before we finish up today. So once we get our lights all situated in place, our calculations are proper, which means an average of 2 foot candles, a minimum of 0.2 minimum average, and then our average min right now is 14:1. Like I said, it only makes a difference in certain municipalities what that is, so you can work on that. But that would be a basic quick lighting outline. There's some issues, so there's definitely some tweaking that would need to be done with some spill out the front, or if that's allowable or not. There's things we could adjust. But now that we have this plan, let's consider it done for now. I'm going to save because I haven't done that. We're going to do that. You'll find that the paths that they go to varies. It might be the last one you saved at, it might not be, so please be very conscious of where you save these. Actually, I went too far already. I found that I like to save at that point because I've had issues in the past when I do the next step, which is getting ready to create the schedules and such for the light fixtures. This is a strange place to put it. I still haven't figured out why they do it this way. But you actually go to print is the next thing you would want to do. And it usually comes up with a blank page with their title block on it. So when you have that, you can go to clear and gets rid of that. Typically all I ever use this for is to get the schedule, which is this button right here. That puts our light fixtures out there, but it always comes with all these extra columns that we don't typically use. So I can get rid of that. I can turn on different things if I want. I want the file name. Let me see here. Number of lamps, quantity. Don't need the image. In this case, you'll see the description and the lamp are not included in the distribution in this case are not included with the IES files. Those in our CAD file has already been filled out for these typical fixtures. If you use a different light fixture, you will have to type all that information in, but I only recommend doing that typing in CAD. All right. So now we have the schedule of light fixtures. It shows us, it gives us the letter. It tells us how many quantities we used. If we didn't use any, we could delete those out if we wanted. This case, we can just leave them there. The other thing I usually put in here is statistics. And then you can enlarge it however you want for both of these. Now I believe this is the 8.5 by 11. All I usually do here is once I have this information filled out, I would go to File, Export. Again, you have to make sure you find the correct folder. In this case, it did keep it. Nope. As soon as I hit on select, it takes me out to somewhere else. So S. And what I usually do here is I'll put in chart. I wanted to, it only gives you the option to save to 2008 DWGs, and I uncheck this because I don't need it to open when it's done, and hit export. So there's multiple steps in here that you have to do to get the charts to go out. And then you can hit close. It's going to say, hey, do you want to save it? And you say yes. Okay, so that's just the charts that we just exported. Well, or that we're exporting. Now we want to get the plan out. But we don't need all of the extra line work because that would just duplicate things. So we can go to layers. Now in this case, we'll take right click on your pencil and we'll say invisible. That gets rid of all the line work that we brought in, or it hides it so you don't take it. And now you can go to File, Export to CAD file, and see this looks different than the other place. So you have to export it twice. And again, you have to make sure you know exactly where you're putting it. So I usually call this just the plan. So we have the project number, plan, and then I might even put the date that I did it on, because what you'll find out is lighting plans change quite a bit, and this part here of bringing it back into CAD is a pain in the butt, and it can take some time to do. I'm not sure we'll even be able to get part of it done today because we're almost out of time. So this exports everything you see here. It basically dumbs it down even more. All of these little numbers count as blocks is how it exports it. So once that is done, I'll hit save on that just to save the actual VSL is the extension for the software. Now we'll go into AutoCAD or Civil 3D. And what I have found is it's best to work on this drawing separate and do not import it into your plot sheets right away. You want to work on it separate, get it ready, and then you can copy and paste it into your plot sheets. If you try to do it in your plot sheets, it can really bog it down because there's a lot of extra crud that's brought in with this process. And again, we end up having to clean this drawing up that we're going to do now. So we'll go to File, Recover, and we want the, let me see, we want the plan. Open. It will go through. You'll see when it does its audit and recovery, there will be thousands of points that are bad. 7,000 some in this case, and this is a fairly small project. It also always turns on the grid in the background, so that's one of the first things I usually turn off within CAD. And when you zoom in, you'll say, hey, none of my foot candle contours show up. That for some reason that layer is turned off. Yeah, when I brought it in, it's all to scale. So if we measured things, it would come in correctly. But you'll notice that the text is all weird. If I click on this one thing, that's all one. Now you can't explode these because then, well, here, I'll show you. If we try to explode these, you get calculation result. You lose all your calculations. So you can't do that. So there's no way to edit these points in order to rotate to make it look right. The text would be all the wrong size, everything like that. Somehow I came across the command burst. Burst allows you to, let's call it, explode a block, but keep the values inside of it. Now, one weird thing that's about burst is if you select everything here, it will do each one individually. Then you could sit here and you can actually watch it do each one up each grid. I usually take a break at that time, but we won't have time today to do the whole thing. So let me just give a quick demonstration of what happens. I selected those, and then you can probably see that little white tick going through. Every single one that I selected, it's going through and bursting each one individually. So as you can imagine with the big grid like this, it can take a few minutes for it to go through and do this. We're going to probably hold off at this point going any further. Really all there is left here is a lot of manipulating the text, the colors, the layers in order to make it look or go within our CAD standards. Oh, there's one thing that's real important. I have created a script that helps to do that process. So we audited, or we recovered. I'm going to do a quick purge on this. I want to get rid of everything that it brought in that's extra. Now we can see we're down to just several layers, but these aren't part of our normal layer standards except for the VSL's contours. I'm not sure how well this is going to work without having everything bursted, but in CAD, there's a Manage button, and then there's a Layer Translator. And I have gone through and I have created a Layer Translator that allows it to do a lot of the work I used to do by hand. So if you hit Load, it should go to, well, it did in my case because it's already there. But under S Design, Pentair CAD Standards, we have a whole folder of layer translations. And that includes some county GIS information, things like that. But in this case, we want to use the VSL lighting plan to DWG. We hit Open, and what it does is it allows it to transfer those layers that are currently, so these layers, it converts them to our standard layers and adjusts all the colors and line types and line weights and such. So I can hit Translate, and in this case we're only going to translate only, and there we go. Okay, so it did work, some of it. We now no longer have those other system layers that were in here. They all have been converted to calculation points to VSL layers. The colors are correct, with the colors and the line types are the correct way. Again, the text you still have to do a lot of manual work with. Once they are bursted, you can actually select similar. Is how I do it. Um, I don't know. So it got all those ones that we bursted, and it's just plain text. So typically I would say, okay, let's change the style to be proposed, not annotative. Justifies left is fine. Height, I typically for the grid, I usually make it half of the scale. So if we're at 50 scale, our text is typically 5 feet tall. So I would make these 2.5 feet tall. Our rotation is something I would pull from the sheet file, however the drawing is rotated, so everything is horizontal. So that's something you have to do both, calculate in the actual drawing so that you can put that in. And then you go through and you just grab all the text and you keep doing that until everything's updated. A lot of times the text styles are not there because of the purging and such. So I would go into my design center and select proposed and visual style and then drag those into our CAD file. And now, like, these are the contour labels for the foot candles. So I would select one of those, select similar. That gets them all. Then I can just go through and change my properties. So those I usually make white, and that would be a proposed. Let's say this is a 30 scale, so we would make it 3. Um, and our justify would be middle center there. And our rotation, I don't know what that would be. We could just leave it at that. So now we have all of those updated. A lot of times those numbers will overlap. I'll go through and manually delete a lot of them, like these here. There's no sense in having them. You can't read any of them. But I'll go through, clean those up. Depending on the site, it can take a little bit of time, but it makes it a lot more legible. For the actual labels for the fixtures, again, I'll do a select similar. These are a little bit different. I leave them yellow, and I changed that to a visual style. It's a little bolder. So let me see. And then the height would be a full height for whatever the scale is. And the rotation is going to be the same. So I would go through, manipulate these, make them look good. Like I said, the CAD line work is not the best. Fixtures get blown up completely. There's probably actually, there's multiple lines on top of each other. So there's a 3D polyline, and there's 3 3D polylines on there. I believe there's also points. Oh, hey, they got rid of the points. Good. But these are also separate out here, so it's still a little messy. It's not the easiest. It's not a block that you can just scale easily. But you learn how to little tricks and stuff like that to really get things going. And then once I got everything cleaned up, I would copy everything to my clipboard, and I'd make sure I'm in World, open up my plot sheet in model space, make sure I'm in World there, and then paste to original coordinates, and they should come in right where they need to be. I know I don't have time to show you because of the burst command taking so long to do, but I'm sure you'll have all questions because there's a lot of stuff that we just covered and a little bit of things I didn't go into enough detail on. I will have a tutorial that you can probably follow right along. It's not quite complete. Let me see if I have it here. But it also has the information about where to download the file. We also have it on the server. You can download it from there. Our license number, our activation number. Our license runs out in June, so we should be good there. And then I'll have step-by-step information, hopefully, of this whole entire process of how to go through and get your basic lighting design set up and ready to go. With that, I'll say that's all I have for today, but that was quite a bit. Is there any quick questions that anybody had going through this? I lost my meat. There we go. Again, don't hesitate to stop me and ask me questions about it. If you are interested and you want to try to do this, let me know. I can always sit through you and walk you through this again. Um, but we'll have some sort of base to start with at least. All right. Thank you, everybody. I hope you have a great day.